Okay, good morning everybody. And I'm just going to set the Instagram one running. There we go. Almost getting good at this stuff now. Only almost. Let's quit you. Okay. I think we're all under control. As ever, when I'm doing these things, there is technology lurking about in just about every single place that I can think of. Instagram people, you are on my phone as usual, so nothing's different for you. But people on YouTube, you are now on my finally replacement for my very, very elderly iPad, old iPad mini and very, very old laptop. So hopefully your picture quality might be a little bit better than it has been. Right, extract fingers from gloves because that's always useful and helpful. We're going to dye this month's Seasonal Changes collection. Hopefully I've got everything out and sorted. I've already dyed a big batch of colourway, which is the Welsh wool and mohair blend. So that should hopefully be dry and ready to go up at the shop tomorrow. There is some new fibre that snuck into the shop yesterday because I'd got some spare time to take some photos. So if anybody's after new fibre, there's advance warning that there's already some gone up there that nobody else has been told about yet. We are in massive getting ready for Wonderwall Wales sort of kind of preparations here because Wonderwall's quite early in April this year. Sometimes it's like almost the very last weekend, and it's not, it's almost kind of what I call mid-April. So by the time we get to the start of March, because it's St David's Day tomorrow on March the 1st, I kind of almost needed to have I needed to have done most of my fibre ordering and kind of have a vague plan in my head about what needs to be dyed to make sure that the big stand that we have is lovely and nice and full. So hopefully I will see some of you there, because by April we'll be on to a new Seasonal Changes pack. But we're going to get on and we're going to crack on with dyeing the March one, because I think I've probably given people enough time to come and join us for now. The winning one that we are going to dye is this one, which is Streamside, which is lots and lots of lovely vibrant green shades. Which feels like something we've not had for a while. We've kind of done quite a lot of brights, quite a lot of pinks. I thought, oh, that would be quite nice. So it's not kind of what it looks like at the beginning of March, but by the end of March, if we've had some warmer weather, we're starting to get hints of sort of things coming into bud and new leaves. So I'm kind of hoping that it kind of is going to evoke that sort of feeling of that trees are turning green again, the grass is starting to grow, things in the garden already sort of popping up and looking lovely. So we will crack on. For any of you who have not been here before, this isn't a dyeing tutorial as such. I just kind of talk the things that are going through my head, which sometimes leads to it being a little bit incoherent, but lots of you seem to come back and watch it again and again, so it must be vaguely interesting. So we are going to get our dyes mixed up, ready to put onto our fibre. I'll show you how the colours all sort of, the thought process behind the colour development, and then I put them on the fibre, we heat set them, and they should be, if I put the dehumidifier on in here, they'll be ready in the online shop tomorrow. So we will get cracking. Now we've got 3 green shades in this pack this time. We've got a very dark green, a very lemony, limey green, and then a kind of more of a mid-toned green. And the thing that I always I warble on about this every single time, it's making sure that there's enough difference between those 3 shades, not just in terms of colour, but also in tonal value, because that's what's going to mean we can use them for colour work and stripes and things, and they will look different enough. So I'm going to start off with the darkest shade of green, and I'm going to reach for this one. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is my darkest shade this is going to be the dark green, and this is a kind of olivey colour that comes, I use it pre-mixed quite a lot. It's a shade of green that I kind of tend use as a base and create variations from it. So I keep it in stock as a pre-mixed green. I could mix it from yellows and blues, but I find this is a really useful shade to keep knocking around, so I keep it there. But by itself, it's a little bit murkier than I want for this colour. I just quite like a little bit more zing to it to make sure that it stays different enough from this shade of brown over here. So I'm actually going to add a whole measure of lemon yellow into it. So let me write that down, because 100 olive, 25 lemon, because if I don't write it down, by the time I come to do it, I've come to recreate it, I'll have forgotten it and I'll have to watch the whole video back, which is a bit of a pain. So that will have just, and it doesn't show up massively well because we've got white background, dark dyes, that will have just brightened up that olivey colour ever so slightly to give us a little bit more yellow in it, not quite so brown and murky. The way that I store my dyes, for anybody who's not seen them before, these are bar optics, so I can use them to very accurately measure out 25 millilitres of dye at a time, which works really well when I do big batches. Later on, when we're doing smaller quantities for these, because I'm only dyeing 100 grams whilst I'm doing palette development, I end up having to use smaller syringes to measure out smaller amounts, but these work really well for what I need when I'm doing, I need 300 millilitres of dye, or I need 200 of this with 25 of that, and it means I can be pretty quick and efficient with measuring out dye. Right, we have done the darkest green. So as this is drying slightly on the kitchen roll, which I tested the colour, it's just brightening up a little bit. There's a very subtle difference between the two greens, but it looks much better with the lemon yellow in. So I'm pleased with that one. I'm going to do the next shade of green along there. So I'm going to go back over to my lemony yellow dye, and we're going to have 50 millilitres of that, which is quite a lot. I don't know, quite a lot of time the palest colours will have far less dye than that, but because yellow is a very visually, it doesn't necessarily stand out very much when you compare it next to a dark green or a brown. It always looks much paler. So I've used more dye than I would sometimes use, but I'm going to go and grab some grey. So I don't need a full 25 millilitres of this grey. Now this grey is a blue toned grey. When you dilute it down to sort of quite a pale colour, it's kind of like a proper, almost an Air Force blue. So it actually mixes very nicely with this yellow to make us some murky greens. So we're going to start off with just 5. Write down the amount of lemon that I've put in, and we'll see where we get to. Tiny bit of water to make it paler, because this will be spread out. The volume of liquid will remain the same. Let's have a look. So we can see we've ended up with a sort of citrony kind of colour. It's nearly yellow, but just shifted slightly into the green spectrum. And if I take a look at it over here, flailing around with bits of kitchen roll, we can see, so this is the other way, this is turned around 180, but that green and that green, that's kind of the vibe that I'm going for. So I always say when I dye these, I'm not aiming to do exact colour matches. Exact colour matches when working with liquid dyes before they have gone on the fibre, which has got a slightly off-white underbase, and before they have been heat set, is really difficult. Some people claim that they can give you an exact recipe to create a perfect colour match every single time, and in my experience it looks right in the wet form when you're messing about with it in the dyes, and by the time you've heat set it, it is no longer quite the same perfect colour. So I always go for, we're creating the vibe of that palette rather than we're creating exact colour matches. So we've got one more green to go. So this is a green which is greener, which sounds really bizarre, but it's in comparison to this one, that with the colour we've just dyed, which is yellow that's just verging into green. This one's kind of like that kind of green, but just a little bit more shifted towards the blue spectrum, but we still don't want it to be too blue. All the greens in this palette are all very, very yellow based. So they're almost quite warm feeling greens, if that makes sense, rather than minty greens, sort of that cool vibe to them. So we are going to go, am I going to go for olive and change the colour, or am I going to mix a green from fresh? I think we're going to go mix a green from fresh. So we've got $50 of the lemon again, but we are going to put in more of this grey, and we'll see where we end up with that. This might be one of those ones, sometimes if you'll notice that I go, it's this, this and this, and we get it perfectly. This might be one we have to fiddle around with a little bit to end up with something that's right. So we've got to this one here. So it always looks darker when it's wet on the kitchen roll like this, but I'm a bit worried. That's now got too much blue in it in comparison to the colour swatch, so I'm not happy with that. Let me have another think. Right, we're going to go back, so I'll put that to one side. That will get used on another bit of fibre at some point. So I'm going to go a different route towards getting it. So that's now, we're going to go back to our olive green dye. And I've changed the yellow that I've put into it. A little bit of water. So this time the lemon yellow is quite an acidic sort of yellow. This daffodilly yellow that I've just used is a lot warmer in tone. Let's have a look. So in comparison, so we're looking at these two colour swatches here. So that's the one that I mixed with the grey. That's the one that I've just mixed up with the olive. So we've ended up with a colour that's much, much warmer. But it could still do with just a tiny, tiny, it's a little bit too yellow now, would be my, you go one way and then you go the other way. It's just not quite vibrant enough. So I'm actually going to put in some of this colour, which is like a bluey, jadey, greeny colour. So it's another one of the colours that I keep pre-mixed up. It's that shade there. And we're just going to put in a tiny little bit of that, just to brighten it up a little bit, if that makes sense. Try that much. So I'm not going to use an enormous amount because it's quite a strong dye. So I've started off with 2 on the basis that I can then add more. I think that's got us roughly to where I want us to be. So it's these double dots here. Let's have a look at it closer and compare it to my reference image. Yeah, okay, I think I'm happy with that. So that will be a little bit darker than the one, visually darker than the one that's made with lots and lots of yellow. but it will be paler than the very, very darkest green we've got. So hopefully we've now got 3 green shades, all of which are different. We now need to dye the 2 darker colours. So there's a browny, olivey, really, really dark, the proper darkest shade in this palette. And then there's also kind of like a tanny, mushroomy colour. So I'm going to start off with the darkest shade, which is another one actually. Lots of the colours in this palette are all going to be based off this olive and manipulating it. That way they all seem quite connected. They'll all sit and work together because they've kind of all got the same base feel to it. So we're going to go 1, 2, and then we're going to use some black dye to darken it right down. And we're also going to add in a dark brown colour as well. 50 olive, 25 black, 25 brown. Let's take a look at that, see what it looks like. It might be it needs some more black or some more brown in it. So that's a very, very dark colour that we've got going on. So you'll see I always look at them, you can see I hold them up so you can see them on the screen, and they never really represent that well as colours. So I always take another closer look at them just to see, because as they start to dry you can start to get a sense of what they're going to look like when they're on the dry fibre, as opposed to when they're at their wettest and when everything looks darker when it's wet, basically. What do you need? Do you need more of any dye? I want to make sure this is a nice proper dark colour. I might add in another 25 of black. Okay. Just to make sure this has got, yeah, that's a better colour. So that's definitely going to be different enough to the dark green. So that was my original one, and then I've made it a little bit darker, just to make sure that it's different to that original first olive colour that we mixed. Next is the final one, which is the one that sort of I'm kind of looking at and going, how do I want to go about formulating this? Is going to be the middle tan colour there. So that's this colour. So we've done all the greens, we've done that one, we've got this shade here. So this is going to be based off some yellow and some brown put together. Is going to be my best guess of how I'm going to end up with the colour that we want. And it's going to be the palest colour in our pack. So because I don't need big quantities, just get rid of that's a bit of liquid out of there. Because I don't need big quantities, these get measured out using syringes rather than anything else. Let's try equal parts. Is this going to be a syringe that doesn't work? We'll make it work. So sometimes the syringes start to just wear out. Let's try 5 of each, and they just don't make a very good seal, so they don't suck up the liquid without sucking up lots of air at the same time. But I think we've got there. Right, that's 5 of each. We're going to dilute that down because this is going to be a colour which is paler, so therefore we need more liquid to spread that dye evenly throughout our fibre. I might just give so the end of the fork I think has got a load of green dye embedded in it. Let's have a look at that. So this colour here is the one that we've just mixed to end up with. Let me take a look at the picture. I think it needs a tiny bit more brown in it. Moment, it's just a little bit too yellow for my liking, but not an awful lot. write down our recipe. So I've just added, it's this one just here. So I've just added a fraction more brown to it, and that's just going to mean that it's a little bit more muted, a little bit muckier. Hopefully that's going to sit quite nicely with our colour palette we've got going on. Let's move the notebook out of the way before I chuck any more dye all over it, because it's already pretty grubby looking. So I think we've now got our colour palette. We've got our 3 different shades of green, we've got a very darkest brown, and we've also got our paler tan colour. So I'm going to start putting those onto the fibre. As ever, I always say I dye these in public and then I reserve the right to look at them and go, because I've been talking, I've made a mess of that and I don't like that particular colour palette. And sometimes they do get changed from the original one. But if anybody does want to reserve one from this original batch because they know they definitely would like some and they trust that it's all going to be in colour form, they're going to like it. If you send me an email, I can send you an invoice for one when it's dried and ready. Equally, if you want to wait and see for it to be in fibre form and a finished photo of it, it'll be going up in the shop tomorrow, any stock that's spare, but then I'll be dyeing more next week. And if you want to reserve one of those once you've seen it, if you send me an email, that means I can definitely get enough fibre dyed in the next batch. So sometimes I'll dye, there'll be enough people saying, yes, I do want one, that I'll do a bigger dye run. Instead of just doing 5 packs, I'll do 10 or sometimes even 15, just to make sure that there's enough to go round. So our fibre has been in soak overnight. So this is Cambrian wool, which is the Welsh Mountain Cross with Blueface Leicester shearling fleeces. It's a lovely multi-purpose wool, nice long staple, nice lustre. It's got a nice crimp to it, so it's sort of got a bit of loft to it. It's what I kind of class as good multi-purpose, does everything kind of wool. So it just goes into soak into just plain water, because that helps the dye spread evenly throughout the fibre. And we're doing small batches, because as I say, normally I dye in sort of about 700 grams in one go. So dyeing 100 grams kind of feels like, it's right back to when I was starting dyeing, and was dyeing small bits and pieces whilst working out how to put the colours and how to combine them together. It's an awful lot easier on your hands dyeing smaller amounts, I know that much. So this is our darkest olive green. So the dye's been poured on and we're just aiming to spread it as evenly as we can throughout the fibre. All of these methods, I only use low water, non-immersion methods with fibre. I just think it gives a better result. The fibre's nicer to spin, it stores better. I can be less proactive about worrying about it to felting during the dyeing phase. I think it just works better. It also works better because we're not on mains water, so it means I'm not using as much water as I work. And then everything gets wrapped up nice and tightly in cling film, gets dropped onto the floor. And we're going to move on to the next colour. So that was our darkest green. This is going to be the next shade of green. Unwrap it, lay it out nice and flat. And we always I aim to get the colour as even as I can, but with the expectation that there's going to be a little bit of movement in the shades. It's not a dyeing method that produces completely flat colour. Right, I think this is our palest green, if I put the jugs down in the order that I think I put them down in. So you can see how by the time we spread this dye out, it ends up looking much lighter. So because we're working with cold fibre and the only thing we're doing is squashing rather than rubbing, we end up with fibre that's really nice to spin and work with. Okay, I think we spread that evenly all the way through. So we're adding, everything gets covered with bits of fluff. We're adding citric acid, which is our dye fixative, if you like. So these are acid dyes, which basically means they need mildly acidic conditions in order for the dyes to form permanent bonds onto the fibre. And to do that, you can use vinegar, you can use anything that lowers the pH, but citric acid is most dyers' acid of choice. It's effectively lemon juice, rather handily with the rise in people making bath bombs and other similar type things. It's got an awful lot easier to obtain. You can buy it in quite big quantities quite easily. So it comes with a powder, which is nice as well. You can then just mix it up into a sort of relatively concentrated solution, so you're not adding too much more liquid. But citric acid's in lots of things. If you like eating the sour fizzy sweets, that's citric acid that makes those sour, and it's used as a preservative in quite a lot of foods as well, or anything where they want to make it have that sort of sharp tang. So this is our final shade of green. Let's add all of that dye on there. So this is our mid-toned green that hopefully we've not made too yellow, but hopefully not made too blue. But we shall see. So we're just spreading the dye evenly throughout, particularly making sure to get the folded over ends. So there's some people doing some lovely long-term projects with these, because I always sort of described the seasonal changes collection as being, it's like a club, but it's not a club. So you can't sign up to say, I always want a parcel every single month, because that gives me, I've already got 2 fibre clubs, I don't need to be trying to do the admin to run a third. And it also means that if something is going on that month, I can just say there isn't going to be any more. I can dye as much as I can fit in without trying to add to the, this has definitely got to be done this month. And it also means it's easy to go, I don't like the colours this month, so I'm not going to have them, because they're not interconnected in any way. But some people spin them up into little mini skeins that they're then using for big colour work projects. Some people take them and they card them. Some people just take them and keep them until inspiration strikes. But I think there's one person who's doing like a giant crochet blanket project with them and using the natural undyed fibre as the joining connecting bit, because you can buy this from me in the undyed form as well. So this is our dark colour. So, and you can also get this fibre already spun into yarn. So the Cambrian Wool Company, they get this processed and turned into a heavy DK weight and a heavy fingering weight, and dyed into a range of other colours. So it's the sort of thing that you could do your own hand spinning to create a yoke, and then use the commercially dyed to knit the body of something, or for joining sections on jumpers and on blankets and things like that. So it's quite nice that you can get hold of a commercial yarn that's made from this same fibre. So you can kind of put it together into projects in that kind of way. And they've got a lovely colour palette available. The people who are, well, Susie, who is responsible for the Cambrian Wool Company now, has got a real eye for colour. And again, just like with the regularly available Colours of Cambria packs that I stock, lots of them are sort of inspired by the Cambrian Mountains and the Welsh Hills. So it's a really nice colour palette, I think. So that's our darkest colour. We have just got the pale one left to go. Which is this one, and I'm looking at them now, and I'm hoping we've got enough colour difference between the two shades of green, the dark tone and the mid-tone. They look like they might be a little bit similar, but as I say, it's really hard to tell at this stage, but fingers crossed we've managed it. If not, I can always dye some more. We can tweak the recipe and go, no, that didn't quite work out right. We'll do it differently. So sometimes you kind of have to be willing to accept failure in order to discover what works. So this is our yellowy brown colour. Again, it looks much darker in the fibre form compared to what it's going to look like when everything's completely dry. We're just trying to make sure the dye is nice and evenly spread through the fibre, like we're there. But yeah, these greens are going to be quite nice actually, because there's not the existing Colours of Cambria packs that we've got are quite blue heavy. Lots and lots of different very nice shades of blue, but I haven't got very much by way of sort of earthy greens in them, which is quite ironic really. Well, yeah, it's quite odd really, because I look out of this landscape here and there's an awful lot of trees still about the place, hedgerows and pockets of ancient woodland still in existence, and come spring the lime green of the oak trees is really quite spectacular. So this is what we've got, which doesn't necessarily look at its most promising in this form. But I think we're going to be good. So we've got the darkest green, the mid-tone green, this paley lemony green, we've got a beigey brown and a very, very dark black. So I've got trying to read what some of the comments, some people say that yes, they use acetic acid. So acetic acid is vinegar, and this is referring to fixing the dyes of some comments that have come through. And the reason I don't use acetic acid, which is vinegar, is because the acetic acid, as it heats up, it smells. It makes the whole place smell like a fish and chip shop, which I'm not massively a fan of. I prefer citric acid is pretty much odourless, so it doesn't smell too bad. I'm trying to see if there's any other comments in there that I need to respond to. So, because yeah, if you've got any questions, you can ask them. But I think somebody very helpfully has just responded and asked in the comments. So we are going to call it a day there. These are all going to go and be heat set. So they go in until, people always say, how long does it take? It takes until it's done, which is a bit like the sort of the vagaries in people's ovens and the amount of fibre you're using, the temperature of the fibre as it's going into the oven. Because obviously we're in winter now, so everything's a bit colder. Come summer, when it's 25 degrees in here, it doesn't take as long to get it all up to temperature for the bonds with the dye and the fibre to form. So these will go, and they are heat set, and we check to see whether the dye is what's called exhausted, which is the dye has made a permanent bond onto the fibre, and then they're left to cool down completely. I'll rinse them, put them up on the drying racks, we'll turn the dehumidifier on, and they should be ready for me to put in the online shop tomorrow, along with the rest of the fibre that I'm dyeing today. And as I say, those of you who are here at the beginning, some new fibre snuck its way into the shop yesterday, some more of the Polworth and Yak, so that'll be good. And I shall, if you are not a member of the Fellowship of Yarn, and you'd like to have a say in the colour palette that we dye next month for the April seasonal changes, do come and join us. There are links in various places on my website, in my bios, in the comments section. If you kind of go clicking some buttons, you will find it at some point, and you can get to choose which you pick. So I always pick 3 choices, and you just leave me a comment and say which one you like best, and the winner is the one that we dye every single month. So it leads to some unusual, unexpected choices, but it's nice because it means that I don't get stuck dyeing the same colours over and over and over and over again. Thank you very much for joining me, and I shall see you all again next month when we do the same thing again. So goodbye everybody. Let's go. And now